Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I'm here with my friend, Mr. Andrew Roskam, who's up in Washington State with AcctCorp International. How you doing today, Andrew?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I can't complain. It's another day in paradise down here in South Florida. I know you're a little bit newer to the industry. You and I have had a chance to hang out at quite a few of the conferences over the past couple of years. But for those that are watching that are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into the seat you're in today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, grew up, born and raised in Washington State, and went to college at Washington State University. Did a finance route there, and then went into banking. And so I spent 7 years in banking, mostly in the commercial banking world. And for most of my life, my dad had worked at a collection agency, and in 2000 started being a debt buyer. He was actually a debt collector and chicken farmer at the same time, believe it or not. That was his first career, and then got into the debt collection world somehow. So then sometime around like end of 2018, 2019, we started having serious conversations about him, getting ready to retire and what that might look like if I were to transition from banking. I loved banking, but I also had always been really interested in the collection world, and debt buying was just like fascinating for me. So then I moved over, middle of 2019, and we have a debt buying company and a debt collection agency up in Pacific Northwest. Primarily buy credit cards and do work in our specific states, and we're kind of expanding that a little bit. But that's what we do up here.
I love hearing it. It's weird to think that you've only been around in the space since around 2019, because I feel like I've known you for a lot longer than that. And maybe it's just because you're a frequent attendee at a variety of conferences, especially RMAI, where I know that you're very active and kind of where you and I initially connected. As an RMAI member and as somebody who's kind of newer to the industry, one of the big questions I wanted to talk to you about today is like, what value do you get from the association? What value are you getting from your membership and your participation?
Absolutely. I get a lot of value from the association. I think my first conference was February of 19, and I was going with my dad and meeting people, seeing if this was something I was going to be interested in. And the thing about it, everybody who is a part of RMA I know is everybody's so friendly, so inviting. There's not a lot of competition, fighting over things. Everybody just wants everybody to do well, and we're all looking out for each other. We're all advocating for each other, and I noticed that right off the bat. And then I think just being involved, legislatively, trying to get on committees, serving, meeting different people has helped me and advance my career a lot quicker than I would have thought. Because this is a fantastic industry with a lot of wonderful people, and when you connect with folks like yourself and other people on the board or otherwise, just a lot of opportunities come to you just by serving and being involved.
I agree wholeheartedly. As the chair of the membership committee, I'm not just saying it as the chair, but for me, my participation in RMAI, I think I went to my first conference in 2006, and it has literally changed my career and my involvement in the committees and the board and everything else as it relates to the association has been really beneficial to me from an education standpoint, networking standpoint, and just really getting to know everybody on a more personal level. And I know you and I got a chance to hang out at the summit recently up in Vermont. And for me, that's like my favorite conference of the year out of all the conferences I go to, because it's such a great opportunity to actually build relationships. I always tell people I go to the annual conference to do deals, and I go to the executive summit to build deep relationships with those people and to get to know people on a personal level, because when problems arise, it's the personal relationships that solve problems, right? Not the lawyers, not all of these other things. It's the personal relationships. It's being able to talk to somebody one-on-one.
100%. And I think, being conferences and things like that, you go, if you're at the annual conference or any networking for any industry, trying to shake hands and like break the ice that way is a lot more difficult than if you're serving side by side with somebody, or you're at the golf retreat or the golf day at one of the conferences, or you're out having a couple cocktails over a few. That goes so much further, because then you're like humanizing the relationships versus, oh, this guy's trying to sell me this product. It's so much easier then you're like breaking the ice and building that rapport way easier. That's what I found.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it's clearly worked in my career, and it's working for yours too. So, participating, and it's about the active participation, right? It's one thing to pay your membership dues and to have your name on a list. However, it's a totally other thing to get involved. And in the short period of time that you've been in the space, you jumped in with both feet. Right. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about the certification side of the world, right? Because I know that that's something that's kind of been near and dear to you in terms of your participation in the organization. So, let's kind of talk a little bit about the value of certification. And then I want you to kind of tell the story about your involvement in the certification program and council.
Yeah. Well, the way I view it, especially now, since I'm newer to the industry, I'm like, CFPB is all I've ever known. And so like it really allows folks like us to play in the sandbox. If you're not certified, it's really hard to get quality, paper and to be able to have quality accounts and work with quality people, because it's just like that legitimizes your business. It's people where I say I'm RMAI certified, that like checks a box for a lot of folks. I heard creditors talking at the summit about how that's a requirement they have. They need to see that certification, just because, when you do, that just means that all these boxes have been checked. So it's like, the value of the certification is it'd be really hard to do what I do without being certified as a company and as an individual. And what was your second question? I can't remember.
So the other thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and I agree wholeheartedly, I think from a certification standpoint, yes, it checks off the boxes for a lot of creditors and all of that. It's that third-party validation that I think really has given it the legitimacy and demonstrates legitimacy of the organizations that have the badge. But as you've been involved in the certification program, right? You've been individually certified, your company's been certified, but you took it one step further and got involved. So tell us a little bit about your involvement in the certification program as kind of a volunteer of the organization.
Yeah, well, actually, the way I really got involved was, I just got lucky or unlucky, however you want to put it, that right as I joined the company, Washington, which is a tougher state for our industry, was trying to pass some legislation for debt buyers. So then that immediately got on the radar of folks like David Reed and the organization as a whole. And so I'm this new guy just trying to learn and be involved, and happen to, get involved in these phone calls. And I never read legislation in my life until this point. So we're looking at these draft bills, and I'm trying to figure out how to read this stuff. So, originally how I got in, and we can tell more of that story later, was legislatively. And then I got to know David, and then, said I wanted to serve on a committee, and, gave me a few ideas of committees that might fit. And so then I started serving on the standards committee, which, selfishly, I was like, this will help me understand the certification program better, because I'm literally going to help, go through the certification program every year and find changes. So I'm going to get more exposure to it. So I'm kind of ADD, so actually sitting down and reading the entire document by myself is less likely than if I'm forced to do it. To be totally honest.
Understood. The governance document is significant.
Yeah, it is, but as it should be. There's a lot of good things in there. But so that's kind of how I initially got involved. Certification is just wanting to learn more, wanting to plug in. Back when I was in banking, networking was my job. We're a community bank. I was out getting clients, we did a lot of lending for commercial real estate and equipment and that type of stuff. But the way you get to know people is networking and trying to be involved and serve on a board, those kind of things. And so I just tried to apply that same concept to my new career, knowing that, the more hands you shake, the more people you get to know, the more you're involved with, more people see you talking and caring and serving, then that legitimizes you as a professional in the industry.
150%. The more active you are, look, like I said, the membership is what you put into it, right? And so certification has always been near and dear, but coming into the industry and only knowing the CFPB error of the debt collection industry, I think also, shines a light on what the RMAI certification has done. It's become such a standard that somebody coming in at this point that doesn't have that long historical context immediately looks at it and goes, well, this is the standard, right? Like they are literally, I believe it's in the logo, we're setting the standard for the receivables industry, which I think is fantastic. But, let's go back and talk about Washington State a little bit, because another thing that I really want to drive home to people, especially those that are members of the association or are considering it, is that RMAI is very active in the state, federal, legislative, as well as with the state AGs, and that's a big. I mean, that's really where the money goes in terms of legislative fundraising and other things that are being done by the association. So tell us a little bit about kind of like your experience, right? So like you're a new guy coming into the industry. There's all these things that are happening in your state. There's all kinds of risk, and there's multiple points of view that are being thrown around in a state that has, historically been a little bit more difficult for debt collection. What was that process like for you, and kind of what did you learn from it?
Yeah, it was interesting. So we have a family friend of ours who owns a collection agency, who's a strict contingency agency in town, and who's really involved with Washington Collectors Association, which is like the ACA chapter in Washington. Mm-hmm. And they have, they're really involved locally, and are advocating and working on a lot of legislation long before I was involved. And so I went to one of their meetings, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for maybe a debt buyer," but they were very cautious because they didn't know a lot of people from RMAI, and their only exposure had been kind of negative to certain debt buyers in the past. But there was this debt buyer legislation coming down the pipe, and they're like, "We would like somebody to be involved who knows, how to look at it." And I'm like, "Sure, I'll be a part of it," even though, again, I was so new, I wasn't going to be very helpful. So then I reached out to David Reed, who I had met, and kind of introduced them, and took what was not really WCA wasn't huge fans of debt buyers at the time, and kind of introduced, and we worked with David and got to know them better, to now what is a really good coalition. So I got to sit at a state representatives, kitchen table with David Reed and some consumer advocates and lobbyists, negotiating this bill, which was it was a fun thing that I never would have thought I would have done. And so that's kind of how I got involved, with just almost by lucky or unlucky that there was legislation happening in my state at that particular time. So I kind of was able to dive right in and got to know David really well, got to know other folks in the industry, being on the phone calls, and, the 50 state legislative committee call, which, for that time, Washington was the first thing we talked about, because, there was debt buyer legislation that could have been harmful. I mean, like requiring debt buyers to, disclose what they purchased the account for, crazy things like that we were able to get out. So that was kind of how it came to be. And it was just, I wasn't, like, to anybody who was ever considering it, I at the time was not qualified to do that, but I just wanted to serve, and, knew when to shut my mouth and when to let somebody like David, who knows what he's doing, talk. It doesn't take anything except for just effort, willingness to do it.
I think you provide an interesting point of view, right? When you're a debt buyer coming into that situation, being able to understand all the points of view at that negotiating table. And I mean, I've learned early in my career when to stop talking and when to, let the expert speak as well. And, I'm
not always successful in that.
Hey, look, it's not an easy thing to learn, right? It's a skill that takes refinement. Mm-hmm. And, it's been my experience in the States and times that I've had the opportunity to work with David Reed, that he's a very knowledgeable person who really understands these state governments, and he understands how to navigate tumultuous waters. And I think that he's a really great resource that maybe gets underutilized by the membership in terms of when you identify that there's things happening within your state. He's an incredible resource to be reaching out to, and to keep these, negative bills or harmful bills on the radar of the association, so that they can make decisions and help to deploy resources or provide strategic insight into how some of these things can be done. It's challenging. There's 50 states, right? Like, it's a lot of work, and RMAI doesn't have a massive staff, but it's really a volunteer organization. And that's why the involvement from people like you that have identified those things in their states and are willing to put in the time and effort to defend an entire industry. And that's really what we're doing, because in defending one state, we're not just defending one state, we're defending all states, because these kinds of things spread like wildfire. And, and sometimes debt buyers, or the debt collection industry in general, is trying, individual states are trying to hold us to a standard that no other business is held to. I'm not aware of other businesses that are required, like you were just saying, to disclose what they paid for the resources that they're using to build their business or to provide their products. Like, it's just a very different kind of approach. And I understand the different points of view that are coming to that table, and I understand how it's been viewed, but the debt collection industry is no longer the Wild West. Not that it ever was. It is a well-regulated industry with a lot of players. And I think that the RMAI and the members and just the people involved in this industry have started to police ourselves. And I think that that was important because it's such a complex industry with so many different facets and complexities that it really does require, kind of some level of self-policing. And that's why I think that that RMAI certification program is continuing to be recognized not only by creditors, but by regulators and legislators, because they see that there's a real effort that's going into this, that it's a constantly evolving program. It's not like it was created one day and then everybody walked away and said, okay, so, on to the next thing, right? Like you said, on the Standards Council, it's a living and breathing document that's constantly going through revisions, and we're making updates based on things that are happening in the marketplace. And there's nobody with better visibility in the marketplace than those that are participating in the marketplace itself.
Exactly. So. And we're the ones that can see it. Like if something's happening in my state, I'm going to hear about it usually before, anybody at RMAI would or nationally. And so like when we brought David in, we can make that introduction. But then when we're sitting at the table and they're like, yeah, we saw Colorado had some legislation that we kind of want to model. And David's like, well, I actually wrote that. So let's talk about it. I mean, it was really cool. And it was able to solve a few of our points of contention that we had, because he's like, well, that's not in Colorado. Like, it just like immediately legitimized. Yeah. Legitimized it. Like, oh, I actually wrote most of that or whatever it was. It was kind of a fun little thing that came up. And I could see the smirk on his face when we heard that.
He works hard, and he's worked hard across a lot of different states. And so I think it gives him kind of a unique perspective. And speaking of RMAI, I'm looking forward to seeing you at annual conference again this year, maybe the regional event in Atlanta. Lots of good things that are coming up.
I'm thinking about it though.
Well, you let me know if you're coming to Atlanta, because we definitely need to take our normal time like we do at a conference, sit down, have a drink, and just talk the industry, right? I feel like it's our responsibility to continue to share information across organizations. Like you said, it's not about contention or competition. It's really, the RMAI is about bringing people together with a common purpose and a common goal. And I think that is what has made the organization as successful as it is.
Yeah, totally agree.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. There's always a lot that I can learn from every guest. And, I feel like I got a little bit more about the certification council and kind of your experience. It's hard to believe that you've only been in the industry for a couple of years. I feel like you've been around forever. You definitely have the knowledge and expertise that you've been developing very quickly. And so I look forward to continuing to learn from you through the years as well.
Thank you. Plan on being around for a while. So.
Awesome. Well, let's hope that we can catch up in Atlanta. If not Atlanta, then I'll see you in Vegas or at one of the other conferences through the end of the year. I'm back on the road. So very much.
When winter comes, it's going to be tempting to want to come down to Florida. So you never know. I may give you a call.
Come on down and visit, man. Anytime. So for those of you that are watching, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them below. Both Andrew and I will be responding to the comments on both LinkedIn and YouTube. If you have any other guests that you'd like to see me interview or topics that you'd like to see us cover, please feel free to leave those in the comments. We're always looking for feedback on the next piece of content that we should be creating for the industry. But until next time, Andrew, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll talk to everybody again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.